This is topic 10, autonomic nervous system. This is going to be the last topic that will be covered for the midterm exam. The overview for topic 10 will be introduction to the autonomic nervous system, contrasting skeletal muscle innervation with the autonomic nervous system innervation, the anatomy of the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic divisions. The enteric nervous system I'll mention briefly, but I am not going to hold you really responsible for knowing about the enteric nervous system, so don't spend a lot of time reviewing that. We'll talk about distribution of autonomic nerve fibers, the physiology of the autonomic nervous system. We'll talk about the receptors that signal through the autonomic nervous system, give examples of autonomic reflex, and lastly, we talk about dual innervation. Now, to understand the autonomic nervous system is to think about what is its basic function. The basic function is to maintain homeostasis. That is, to keep the body temperature, for example, constant at a constant level. And it does so by doing what? Controlling sweat glands, blood flow through the skin. In addition, it regulates complex activities like digestion of food. And with that, in terms of digestion of food, it also plays a role in terms of absorption of food through control of heart rate in terms of the peripheral vascular system. And so all this is occurring in the absence of conscious thought. The difference between somatic, that is, innervation of skeletal muscle, and the autonomic nervous system is that skeletal muscle innervation, use the sciatic nerve as an example, consists primarily of a axon from a motor neuron in the spinal cord that will innervate a skeletal muscle, and then sensory neurons coming from that skeletal muscle projecting into the spinal cord. The autonomic nervous system will innervate smooth muscles, not skeletal muscle. Will also innervate cardiac muscle, and glands. Example would be the vagus nerve. And this consists primarily of axons of autonomic motor neurons, and in addition, sensory neurons. The cell bodies of motor neurons are found where? In the ventral horn of the spinal cord, and they extend from there to innervate skeletal muscle. They control the movements of the motor system, and this is generally conscious thought, whereas the autonomic nervous system control are unconscious. The effects of motor neurons on skeletal muscle are always excitatory, but the effects of the autonomic nervous system, depending on the target tissue that's being innervated, can either be excitatory or inhibitory. A good example is parasympathetic innervation to the heart is inhibitory. Sympathetic innervation to the heart is excitatory. The autonomic nervous system has two neurons in a series between the CNS and the organ being innervated. The first neuron of the series is called a preganglionic neuron, and this is located either within the spinal cord or within the brainstem. We'll talk about that in a second. And the second second autonomic neuron is referred to as your postganglionic neuron. Now, the autonomic nervous system is divided into the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions. In addition, you have the enteric nervous system, which are part of the autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions differ structurally. That is, they differ in terms of where the preganglionic neurons are located within the CNS, and also the location of their autonomic ganglion, that is, that postganglionic neuron. Sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions supply the same organs. They work in opposition. Sometimes they work synergistically with each other. The enteric nervous system is a complex of neurons, cell bodies, and axons that are contained within the walls of the digestive tract. In terms of the sympathetic system, the preganglionic cell bodies are located where? They're located in that lateral horn of the gray matter. And this is from T1 to the second lumbar, T1 to L2. And so sometimes the sympathetic division is referred to as a thoracolumbar division. Now, axons from these preganglionic neurons are going to pass through the ventral root of spinal nerves, T1 to L2. And they're going to leave and they're going to project to the sympathetic ganglia. Sympathetic ganglia will contain contain some of the postganglionic neurons, and there's a left and a right, and they're just outside the vertebral column. And so there are two types of sympathetic ganglia. One I talked about just briefly, the sympathetic chain ganglia, which are run parallel to the vertebral column, and they're left and right. And then there's the collateral ganglia, and the collateral ganglia is an unpaired ganglia. Now, the sympathetic chain ganglia, like I said, they form a chain, so that's why they're called sympathetic chain ganglia. And so they extend from the cervical to the thoracic region. You have 3 cervical, 11 thoracic, 4 lumbar, and 4 sacral. And so what happens is that preganglionic axons, for example, in the thoracic area, they're going to cervical area, will ascend in the sympathetic chain ganglia to synapse in the sympathetic chain ganglia in the cervical region. Collaterals are unpaired. They are axons of the preganglionic. So they're located into the collateral. They're located in the abdominal pelvic cavity. The preganglionic axons are small, and more importantly, they're myelinated. The short connections between the spinal nerve and sympathetic chain ganglia, through which the preganglionic pass, is called a white communicans. And so here you see the presympathetic neuron projecting out of the ventral root going into the sympathetic chain ganglia via the white communicans. And again, it's called a white communicans because of the fact that these preganglionic sympathetic neurons are myelinated. I want you to be familiar with the 4 routes of sympathetic axons. The first is spinal nerves. And so here you have your preganglionic sympathetic neuron that will project with the ventral root. It will leave the ventral root, enter the sympathetic chain ganglia via the white communicans. Either it will synapse at the level where it projects out on the spinal cord, or it will ascend or descend and synapse at a higher or lower spinal segment. It will synapse onto postganglionic neurons, postganglionic sympathetic neurons within the sympathetic chain ganglia. These will give rise to unmyelinated postganglionic sympathetic neurons that then will rejoin the spinal nerve via the gray communicans. So that's the gray communicans there. Sympathetic nerves, on the other hand, they will exit just like the example for the spinal nerves. They will synapse within the sympathetic chain ganglia, but instead of re-entering the spinal nerve, what they will do is these postganglionic sympathetic neurons will give rise to the sympathetic nerves. And so the sympathetic nerves will exit. Again, these will be unmyelinated. The other are splanchnic nerves. And so here they will again exit. These preganglionic sympathetic neurons will then exit, as I discussed earlier, via the ventral roots. They will exit the ventral roots and synapse into the sympathetic chain ganglia, but they will not synapse. Instead, what they will do, they will give rise to these myelinated splanchnic nerves, and there they will project to the collateral ganglia, and they will synapse onto the collateral ganglia. The collateral ganglia will be your post sympathetic ganglia cell. and then they will innervate viscera, as shown here. In terms of the adrenal medulla contains postganglionic neurons. This is derived embryonically, and so here the axons, the presympathetic autonomic nervous system axons, will again exit via the ventral root. They will pass through the sympathetic chain ganglia. They will also pass through the collateral, and they will directly synapse onto these postganglionic neurons that are contained within this medullary cell. And so this uses as a summary to look at the 4 different roots that I just talked about for the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic autonomic nervous system. The parasympathetic, their preganglionic cell bodies are contained in S2 to S4, as well as cranial nerves 3, 7, 9, and 10. And so they're referred to collectively as craniosacral division. The preganglionic axons will course through these nerves, and they will terminate on postganglionic parasympathetic neurons that are near or embedded into the organ that's being innervated by the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's different than what we've seen with the sympathetic nervous system. Again, I don't want you to spend a lot of time with the enteric nervous system. The only thing here, just for your own edification, is that there consists of at least 100 million neurons embedded into the wall of the digestive tract. They regulate the motility of the esophagus, stomach, intestines, and they also regulate the secretion of digestive enzymes and acids. And they, in addition, detect changes in the lumen content. Again, you can read through this, but I'm not going to. This is not going to be something I'm going to test you on. Some terminology you might hear: autonomic nerve plexus. All that is a formation of neurons, sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions. Plexus are named by either the organs they innervate or blood vessels that they are found. And so examples would be the cardiac plexus. The cardiac plexus is going to innervate the heart. Thoracic aortic plexus are found along the thoracic aorta. These are other examples. I do not want you to spend time memorizing what they are and where they're going to be innervating. It's just gives you an example as to the different plexuses. In terms of your sympathetic division, those that are running with the spinal nerves, they're going to innervate the dermatomes that we talked about before. So this shows the dermatomal level, dermatomal map in which the spinal nerves innervate. And so here you could utilize this in terms of looking at the different target organs that are innervated by the sympathetic nervous system, from the eye to the salivary glands, the heart, lung, as well as the viscera shown here. In addition, you see the bilateral sympathetic chain ganglia, as well as the collateral sympathetic ganglia. Parasympathetic, they are going to reach their organs again and synapse onto postganglionic parasympathetic neurons that are embedded within the organ or very close to where the organ is. The oculomotor preganglia projects to the ciliary ganglia, and the postganglionic axons innervate the ciliary muscles in the iris. Facial preganglionic axons project to the submandibular ganglia, and then that gives rise to the postganglionic parasympathetic axons that are going to innervate the lacrimal gland and mucosal glands of the nasal cavity, palate, and some salivary glands. Glossopharyngeal, cranial nerve number 9, is going to innervate, project to the otic ganglia. The otic ganglia give rise to postganglionic parasympathetic axons that are going to innervate the parotid salivary gland. And lastly, the vagus, cranial nerve number 10. Preganglionic axons from there are going to project to the cardiac plexus, pulmonary plexus, esophageal plexus, and abdominal aortic plexus. They're giving rise to postganglionic axons are going to innervate, for example, on the trachea and lung, heart, as well as abdominal organs, viscera. And so here, this just shows a diagram of the parasympathetic innervation. And this is the conclusion of part 1 of 2 of topic 10, the autonomic nervous system.